And as I mentioned earlier, Karoline Leavitt, as I like to call her, Karoline the lying bitch Leavitt, because that's what she is. I'm not going to, be careful with my words here because I think she's a terrible human being and a liar. And I wanted to get right into the audio of some of the press conference that took place earlier today. So, Karoline Leavitt, talking about President Trump, or drunk, I think as I just said, being in charge. The days of criminals being put over victims are over. I really don't understand what Karoline Leavitt is really trying to get at here, but speaking of criminals, I just want to remind everybody, Donald Trump is the 34-count felon, but have a listen to this.
With President Trump in charge, the days of criminals being put over victims are over. On the topic...
I don't know really what she means by that, because last I checked, the man who she works for is a 34-count felon, but that's okay. We'll let that one slide, okay? Maybe just a blunder. Parts of the press conference today, they made it a point to go after the Washington Post. Now, we always hear freedom of the press, right? Freedom of the press, freedom of speech, our First Amendment rights. But yet Karoline Leavitt made it a point today to go after the Washington Post for trying to change a headline. Folks, I am not making this up. Have a listen to this.
Very first briefing, several months ago, I said I would hold anyone accountable in this room. The Washington Post actually had this headline, the mysterious drop in fentanyl seizures on the U.S.-Mexico border. How is this mysterious? There is no mystery about why there is a decrease in fentanyl coming into the United States. This administration's strong border policies are the reason there has been a decrease in fentanyl trafficking. His strengthened relationship with Mexican President Sheinbaum and all of the measures he has been taking to deter illegal human and drug trafficking at our United States southern border is the reason for plummeting fentanyl seizures at the U.S. border. There is nothing mysterious about that, and we'd like to see the Washington Post update their headline accordingly. This is clearly trying to intentionally manipulate the minds of the Americans, and I think the American people understand why there's been a fentanyl drop. And our office responded to this inquiry. We provided a whole host of the reasons that fentanyl seizures at the southern border have dropped, and the Washington Post refused to run them.
Yeah, there you go. So Karoline Leavitt basically taking time out of the press conference, making it a point to go after members of the media because she doesn't like a headline. She doesn't like a headline. That's why. They actually took the time today to not talk about the economy in logical senses, right? Or talk about the war in the Ukraine or these trade wars where we don't have deals being put in place or people not getting the right to a hearing. They didn't talk about really the important issues that Americans want to hear about. No. Karoline Leavitt decided to go after the Washington Post. This is what this administration is focused on. And there was a joke made by somebody in the Trump administration about the fact that this is hurricane season where so many people lose their lives and lose their livelihood. Karoline Leavitt was asked about that. Have a listen.
And about hurricane season appropriate, though, now that this is serious business, as you talked about?
It's serious business, Kelly, and I'm not going to engage in such fodder with a question like that.
Somebody in the Donald Trump administration made a joke about hurricane season. As you know, during hurricane season, sadly, I wish this wasn't the case, so many people lose their lives, right? So many innocent people. But yet, somehow it's okay for somebody within the Trump administration to make jokes and to laugh. Somehow that makes it funny. And of course, Karoline Leavitt doesn't want to address that. She doesn't want to address that issue. No, that can't be true. You're just a fake news media. We don't want to talk about that. They think it's funny. And you notice how Karoline Leavitt somehow thinks that it's fake news. You notice that? Just completely sickening, and it's completely disgusting. And then there's Caitlin Collins, who I think is a very good journalist at CNN. Caitlin Collins asking Karoline Leavitt what I would consider is to be a pretty darn good question in regards to the deficit. There are Republicans out there that do not think this is a big, beautiful bill. There are several Republicans out there that have been very outspoken on it. Caitlin Collins asked that question. Have a listen to this.
Caitlin.
Two questions for you as well. On the big, beautiful bill, you said recently that it is, quote, blatantly wrong to say that it adds to the deficit. You essentially said that an estimate from the Congressional Budget Office and other scorekeepers you believe are wrong. But Republicans like Ron Johnson and Rand Paul disagree. They are saying that it will add to the deficit. That is their concern. Is the White House's position that those two Republican senators are, quote, blatantly wrong?
It is. Those senators, it's not news that they disagree with this president on policy, and the president has vocally called them out for it and for their not having their facts together.
They don't have their facts together, Karoline Leavitt just said. So every economist that is non-biased has said that this big, beautiful bill will get us somewhere between $5 to $6 trillion in debt over the course of the next year or two. But yet, when a few Republicans are against this bill, and there are a few Republicans that plan on not voting for this bill, somehow they don't have their facts right, but the Trump administration does. This is, again, par for the course for Karoline the Liar Leavitt. And this was probably, as I would consider it to be, one of the most embarrassing parts of the press conference earlier today. Peter Doocy, also known as Peter Douchey, as I like to call him on Fox News, brought props to this press conference to try to prove that Biden used some sort of Autopen to sign pardons. Now, obviously, there's no real evidence to suggest that that took place, but again, Peter Doocy still tries his best, and of course, Karoline Leavitt entertains it. Have a listen to this exchange.
Thank you, Caroline. When you look at these last-minute Biden pardons, the big ones, Biden siblings, Fauci, January 6th committee.
That's right.
Most of the big ones have the same very neat signature. We would expect that probably to be the Autopen. There is one that looks different. It looks authentic. In fact, if you look at the last name, it almost looks like the president was having a hard time spelling his last name there. Is this White House of the opinion that the only pardon that would count is one that the president signed himself?
It's very interesting. Very interesting props. If you want to bring them to my office later so I can take a closer look, I would like to do that. The president is making a good point when he discusses the usage of the Autopen. Who was running the country for the past 4 years? Perhaps those documents were signed with the Autopen, something that this, I believe the Department of Justice is looking into. As you saw, Ed Martin made an announcement at the Department of Justice this morning to launch an investigation because the American people deserve answers.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So, again, a right-wing entity like Fox News and Peter Doocy, who, by the way, has zero credibility, brings props to the press conference. There's no real evidence that there was an Autopen that was used. And again, Peter Doocy, disrespectful, Biden struggling to sign his last name. There's no evidence of that. So what does Karoline Leavitt do? She entertains it. Why? Because it's negative. Anything that could be negative about Joe Biden, she entertains. Anything that could be positive about Donald Trump, she entertains. But if it's anything else, she doesn't have an answer for it. Don't we understand that this is what this administration does, and it's what they will continue to do over the course of the next 3.5 years, period? Another embarrassing press conference filled with lies and propaganda and attacking certain media organizations because they don't like a headline in an article. That's what Karoline Leavitt does. And that's what she will continue to do. But yet people believe it. And she will continue to call on right-wing members of the media to ask the fluffer questions that will somehow make Joe Biden look bad and make Donald Trump look good. That was the case again this morning. They take the time because they don't like a Washington Post news headline. Can you imagine if they did this in the Barack Obama administration? Could you imagine if they did this in the Joe Biden administration? Can you imagine? Every single headline you don't like in the media to make it a point to talk about it in a press conference. I think most administrations have better things to do than to worry about stuff like this. It's sad. It's pathetic.